Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. I'm Manners, and I had the most superb surprise earlier this week when one of my good friends from the Indian cricket media reached out to me to say he was coming to Sydney. So I'm absolutely overjoyed to be joined by Chandresh Narayan who's visiting from Mumbai to Sydney. Chandresh, welcome to the podcast, welcome to my studio, and welcome to Sydney. How are you?
I'm very well, Manas. Thanks a lot for having me here. And it was a pleasant surprise, yes, yeah, for me as well, that you invited me over. And it's a nice place, nice studio. And I'm loving every minute that I'm having here in Sydney and most importantly in Australia.
Oh, it's great to have you here. And the first time we met, we were arguing online, probably about cricket opinions and stuff. So we can actually argue in person, I guess, now. But just firstly, as a tourist, do you give Australia the big thumbs up?
Absolutely, more than a big thumbs up. I think this has been a fantastic trip for my wife and I. We take trips almost every year. Like I told you, it's usually either her birthday or my birthday. This time it's her birthday, so we took a trip accordingly, and it's been good fun. We've done a lot of walking, and I hope my trainer, when I go back, tells me that I have maintained the fitness standards that she expects of me.
Have you been enjoying the great Australian food?
Yes, I've been loving it, and it's been good fun catching up with friends like you. And I met a school classmate right here in Sydney after 3 decades, and I'm
Wow.
meeting one more tomorrow. Uh, I I couldn't have imagined that guys who were sitting right next to me for 15 years in school all those years ago would meet me 30 years later in a foreign country, and that to Sydney.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, your wife is very lucky that you've come in winter here. So there's actually not a lot of cricket going on. But there is an Indian team touring here. The India A women's team are touring here, but that's about it. So your wife's very lucky. Otherwise, she would have been stuck at cricket grounds all around the country.
Yeah, she had no clue about cricket before our marriage. So she, like most girls in India, would get tongue-tied when they saw Rahul Dravid because he was the heartthrob in the late 90s and
Really?
yeah, in late 90s and early
Wow.
2000s.
I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, no, so he had that charm about him. He had
Ladies,
that
man.
ladies man, absolutely. He
The
does
wall.
not present himself as a ladies man like
No.
some others, but he had that personality. So she always was very charmed by his charming personality. But apart from that, she had absolutely no clue about cricket. And now she watches cricket with me. She has some opinion, and one of them is very controversial.
What is it?
She says that the LBW rule shouldn't exist at all. She said it's a waste of time. I said, why? She said, no, it's bullshit. So what if if the ball hits my pad? Rubbish. You can't just penalize me for that. So yeah, so and
She's never been a bowler,
she's
clearly.
never been a bowler, and she says, oh, when a test match is on, oh, they're still batting. I thought they went off. I said, no, that was tea. That was lunch. So that's a bit of a new thing for her, Test cricket. T20 is much easier for her to understand. And before they started having the names at the back, Test cricket was a struggle for her because
Mm.
you wouldn't place who's who. I don't like the names at the back, but people like her love the names at the back and the numbers. I hate that, but I'm an old fogey now.
Yeah, I'm with you that I didn't like it at first, but I do know it is very good for spectators.
Yeah,
And we take for granted you and I can
yeah,
recognise most players because we love cricket so much,
yeah,
but a lot of people can't. And even at domestic level here
yeah,
for the Sheffield
yeah,
Shield, it's great for casual fans if they turn on
yeah,
because then they know who's playing.
yeah.
But listeners, we've got a great episode. I'm going to pin Chandresh down on some opinions about the upcoming Indian tour to Australia later this year, the first ever 5-test Border-Gavaskar series. So I'm looking to get Chandresh's thoughts on that. Also look back over some of the great battles between Australia and India lately. I just want to remind everybody that we've launched an ad-free Cricket Unfiltered feed. So if you subscribe to the podcast on Patreon, you get an ad-free version of this show, and the link is in the show notes. Chandresh, first question. Are you over losing the World Cup final to Australia last year, or is that still disappointing?
Uh, I thought I was over it,
Yep.
but I was in Cairns and I saw a big hoarding featuring Travis Head uh, promoting solar energy. And I was telling my wife I didn't want to see him because he's the reason why India didn't win the 50 over World Cup. And I thought that was done. I saw the big hoarding. Then we came back to the hotel room. We switched on television. The first advertisement running on television was the same one of solar energy with Travis Head right in front of me. So I can tell you, even though I want to get over it, Travis Head is ensuring that I don't get over it. So yeah, I think it was a tough pill to swallow for a lot of Indians. And people started looking for parallels. 2003 World Cup, Australia remained unbeaten and beat India in the final. India, on the other hand, lost only 2 games in that particular, one game in the league phase in that particular tournament. That was to Australia, and then lost a second game in the final. So everybody started putting two and two together. So it's happening in reverse. It's 2003 and 2023. But only thing, the result didn't go India's way.
No.
Yeah. So it was a very tough pill to swallow because I can tell you this much that the entire country, for the first time since the 1990s, I saw uncles, aunts, families getting together and watching a World Cup. I had aunts calling up who had given up watching cricket when the Hansi Cronje fiasco happened. And they started calling me up saying, what's going to happen? The entire, families got involved in cricket. What's been happening in the last 15 years is that the Gen Zs, as they call them, or the millennials, they're the only ones who've been loosely involved with the game. But the ODI World Cup last year in India was for the first time in a very long time I've seen families getting involved, making plans to get together and watch the match together. I'd never seen that for a very long time, and I thought I sort of had taken that for granted over the years. But I think that particular tournament really changed my perception about it. And the T20 World Cup this time really helped take it a notch further. But I think the ODI World Cup, I think because of the length of the match, the duration of the match, the fact that India was playing 10 matches at a
In
stretch
India.
in India, full houses, that made a huge difference. And they were winning. So you didn't need anything better than that.
I thought it was just an incredible performance from Australia to win that final. Just an all-time classic Australian performance. I mean, Australia does bring a certain aura into 50 over World Cups with our rich history. And I went into that match thinking Australia was going to really struggle. And when Pat Cummins won the toss and elected to bowl, I thought this is game over. India have got a World Cup here. But it was an extraordinary performance from Australia in the field with the bat. You mentioned Travis Head. And just one of those performances where it was a team of Australia had a lot of champion players, and they really lifted in the final. So I think it's probably close to Australia's best ever World Cup win. Beating India in India on that day was incredible.
Imagine the kind of pressure the team would have been under, the Australians as well. 130,000 Indians inside the stadium, billion plus people watching all over the world. To absorb that kind of pressure and still win that World Cup final that day and to chase, that's the best part, to chase against a bowling attack which was doing well right through the tournament. Though I still felt that India was a bowler short in that particular tournament after Hardik Pandya was out injured. The problem that India had, and they're trying to plug that in this particular one-day series which got over yesterday against Sri Lanka, is that they, over the last 10 to 12 years, they've not had batters who can bowl. And that, I think, was a problem. In the past, the captain could have thrown the ball to a Tendulkar, to a Sehwag, Ganguly, Raina, Yuvraj.
Somebody to take a few overs.
Just to bring in a few overs and then maybe do the magic. You never know what happens.
Change it up.
Yeah, just like my son-in-law, Glenn Maxwell. I'll explain to you why I call him my son-in-law.
Please, why?
So I'll just finish this point.
Yeah.
So basically, I think that India missed that trick. They had just 5 bowlers and they didn't have an additional bowler to bowl. And I think that's where they missed out, I think. And I was hoping right through the tournament that it wouldn't cost them. But I knew somewhere down the line it would cost them. So when you're down to just 5 bowlers, you have no other option but to just keep bowling the same one. And sometimes that doesn't really help matters.
And that Travis Head catch of Sharma was
Oh,
just
that,
incredible.
that too under pressure. Again, the pressure.
He's not even a good fielder. I don't know if you've seen him fielding recently. He's not that great.
Yeah, so that shows the kind of commitment that he had that day to
Mm.
come up with that catch.
So why is Glenn Maxwell your son-in-law? Why do
So
you call him your
I
son-in-law?
call him my son-in-law, and this is something that I picked up. I started as a joke, is because he married a girl who's from South India,
Mm.
and I'm a South Indian, so I sort of joke that he's our son-in-law. So
He loves India.
he loves India. His bride's from Chennai.
Yep.
So I trace my roots to Chennai. So I keep joking that Glenn Maxwell is my son-in-law because he's married a girl from my city. So in a sense that we have to respect my son-in-law in that sense. I would joke that during commentary during last year's World Cup.
I have a question for you. The impression recently on my podcast in Australia, and I talk about this all the time, is that the BCCI runs cricket. The ICC basically is so reliant on the income from the Indian market that they basically run the ICC. So basically, the BCCI and India is running cricket. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I think I've worked both places. I've worked with the IPL and then I've worked with the ICC as well in Dubai. Uh, and I think the dependence on the Indian market has increased in the last 15 to 20 years. And that's ensuring that during this recent T20 World Cup, you saw how the schedule was tailored for India because the large chunk of your sponsor money, broadcast money comes from the Indian market. Only this time during the T20 World Cup, the three main sponsors that ICC had were not from India: Aramco, Emirates, and DP World. Emirates and DP World are from UAE, and Aramco is from Saudi Arabia. So this was probably the first time in a very long time there are three main sponsors for an ICC event or for ICC were not from India. But still, they also want India to be featured. This time, for the first time in this cycle, ICC has sold television rights region-wise. Like in Australia, it's gone to Amazon Prime.
True.
So in India, it went to Star. The major chunk of that broadcast, because they have carved it out and sold it accordingly, has come from India. And so that's why the you can sense that the ICC is tailored around what suits best for an Indian team. What I don't like is the fact that some advertising executive working in a television network has turned around and said that you need to make sure that the matches are around Indian prime time, which is 8 to 10 p.m.
Yep.
Which is about 10 a.m. in the morning in West Indies and around the same time in the States. Now, who's to tell me that if the final of the T20 World Cup was played at night in Barbados, who wouldn't have turned on their television or their handsets to watch India play South Africa in the T20 World Cup final? They would have turned on the television.
Absolutely.
It's just some logic that the advertising executives have come up with, and there's no one at the ICC to push them back saying that, I understand you pay us the money, I understand that you are telling us because you want your product to be sold, but if India is winning a World Cup final, everyone will switch on the television. So you can't tell me that nobody at the ICC can't push them back. I think I was just discussing this with someone that I know very closely, that the game lacks leadership now.
Absolutely.
The game lacks leadership. And what's happened, Manas, is that when the ICC board meets, essentially the ICC board is made up of the representatives of the full members and the associates, plus one independent director in Indra Nooyi, who was former CEO of Pepsi. All of them turn up over there, not as ICC directors. They turn up over there as their country's representative.
Absolutely. And they're always trying to get the best for their country.
Yeah, so no one bothers. So there's no leadership in the game to tell South Africa, how dare you send a second or a third string test side to New Zealand for a series which is part of the World Test Championship. Isn't that devaluing the World Test Championship?
Absolutely.
There's no pushback because there's no leadership.
No leadership.
Because everybody's looking after themselves, everybody's looking after their own franchise league. What you're ending up with is a sport which I'm sad to say this, that is just slowly but surely crashing down. And it's happening right in front of our eyes. No
Well,
one
I don't
seems
think it's
to.
crashing, but I think it's changing.
It's no, I think crashing in the sense that it's becoming more franchise based, and eventually it might just end up becoming a one country sport. I think that's my worry about this sport.
Right.
That you might end up having Kolkata Knight Riders playing Mumbai Indians in a World Series final, like it happens in MLB, in USA. So you don't want to reach that stage where Kolkata playing Mumbai becomes a World Series final, because look at the trends that are emerging. IPL team owners buying teams all over the world. Uh, the ICC just being a mute spectator, because at the end of the day, it's a member-driven organization. They don't have, it's not a FIFA,
No.
so it can never take a stand. Now, eight. So you need leaders to think about the game rather than about their own country first. I think that's what the game lacks right now.
Yeah, it's being driven by franchises wanting to make as much money as possible. But I guess there's a few things I want to pick up on there. But firstly, I do get some feeling from elements of the BCCI and Indian cricket that there is a sense that it's India's time. They spent a lot of time nodding and listening to Australia and England, and Australia would play India when it suited them and all that. England were a bit better, I think, the way they played India. But now it's like, okay, well, actually it's India's time now and we're going to be in charge. And I think Australia and England are lucky because India wants good teams to play against. I still think there's national fervour in India. They love, as you said, the 50 over World Cup brought the country together. So for India, they do need Australia and England to be able to put out decent test sides. But I actually think deep down, they don't care really about the other test nations. They just need a few good teams to play.
Yeah, and you can see that in the calendars that are drawn up. Again, the calendars are drawn up in one room where all of them sit in one room and talk to each other and sort out the calendars amongst themselves. The ICC is just providing them the room to sit and discuss. Again, there's no leadership there.
No, not at all.
They need to be taking control of that. So they're just sitting in one room like this and just sitting across the table. They're moving to the next table and then sorting it out, going to the next table, sorting it out. So I really don't know where it's headed, because
well, don't you think it's going to be windows? So don't you think, as you say, franchise cricket is going to take over, and then we will just have, say, okay, there's a month here for Test cricket, a month here for Test cricket, and a month here, and there'll be a few windows, and they jam it all in.
That would happen, but even for franchise cricket to survive, is it making money? I'm not so sure about Big Bash League. I think
It's doing pretty well.
So that's a exception to the rule. But 100 is struggling in England. CPL is at times struggling.
Well, they're going to put the 100 on the market in September. Yes. I wonder if Indians will be buying into that.
It's already happened. Hampshire has been bought over by the owners of Delhi Capitals.
Right.
So that is up for review at the end of the season. So we'll come to know. Once that happens, they'll also have a stake in one of the teams in the 100. So what's going to happen is that more and more teams which are owned by IPL team owners, more and more leagues which are owned by IPL team owners will survive. And
like the MLC,
ILT20, SA20, CPL as well. They've got teams owned by Indian team owners, IPL owners. Even the 100 once it goes on the market, and obviously you have the IPL. So these are the sort of leagues that will survive. I'm not so sure about, say, the Lankan Premier League, Pakistan Super League, Bangladesh Premier League. It was doing well, but after the recent political developments, I don't know what happens in that country with the Bangladesh Premier League.
True, yeah.
So I think that only leagues which have got strong backing, financial backing of companies which are interested in the sport, like the IPL team owners, will survive. And eventually, I think even Big Bash League will have teams owned by Mumbai Indians or by Kolkata Knight Riders.
Yeah, the problem for the Big Bash is if they don't do that, they just won't be able to compete with the wages being offered in other leagues. So they will have a huge drop off in the talent they can get. And the disparity in pay at the moment is not so great. It's still there. Like, you've got Cummins, Smith, Head, all these guys playing in MLC, getting paid a fortune for a month's work, but they're not playing in the Big Bash. But that gap is going to get more pronounced because there'll be the opportunity for club owners in India to go, I've got 3 teams in 3 competitions. Hey, Daniel Sams, there's an Australian player, who's a very good franchise player. I'm going to contract you. You can play for us all year, and here's a couple $1 million, and off they go. So one thing I take a different view on is, for us as, classic fans who love Test cricket, cricket is changing. But I think if you're a young person getting into the game, there's actually more and more opportunities to play cricket now professionally because, you might not be good enough to play first-class cricket, but you might be a very good T20 player. And those opportunities weren't there before. In fact, in the past, if there was a selector who didn't like you and decided, look, I'm not going to give you a New South Wales contract, that was your career, done. Whereas now, if someone does that to you, you can go, all right, well, I'm going to go and play all around the world. So I think that's the positive from this.
Absolutely. And I always believe that not everybody needs to play every format. Not every country needs to play every format. And I would even be fine if there were, say, 8 test teams, 60 one-day teams, and I don't quite like this rule of everybody being a T20 international side, because some of the records attributed to Belize and Argentina,
it cheapens the records.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't know who came up with that idea of giving everybody an international status. And some of the
I don't think they have an option though. That's the thing. Like, you either try and grow the game or you don't. It's like international football. Like, I think Australia has the record for most goals in a football game because we scored, 20 against some island. That's nothing like, England playing France in a soccer game. Well, you're a Liverpool fan, aren't you?
No.
Where do you support?
I'd support Manchester United.
I knew it was a red team. I'd seen the colours. But yeah, so I agree with you that it cheapens it. But I think if you want to bring these countries in, it's the only way to do it.
So, and I think that's why it's very important that nobody's forced to do anything. And I think that in this day and age of everybody having their own free will to decide what pronouns they have, what they like to be called, how they like to be addressed, you can't force anybody to play Test cricket.
Exactly.
It's the classic form of Test cricket, and you would have kids turning up and saying, "What the hell? This guy's just playing tap ball for the last 1 hour. He's not scored a run." If it's Cheteshwar Pujara, he's not scored a run. What am I watching? Why am I? And I might switch my
IPL.
Switch to IPL. I can watch some crashback wallop. I think that's what you need to leave it to the whoever wants to play whatever format. Leave it to them rather than forcing them to pick up a format.
And the world has got to a stage where people have a lot of pressure on their free time. People, working harder, they have less free time. So, it's wonderful to have Test cricket or first-class cricket on in the background, or obviously you and I are watching it because we love it. But, you can watch a T20 game in a few hours. You can get home from work, sit down, you watch a game like a game, when Manchester United play, it's all over in a few hours. So, you have to take into account that. And I never forget that. Like, we love Test cricket, but like you, if there is only 5 or 6, I actually think if there's only 5 or 6 really good Test sides, I think that's all Australia needs. India, England, Pakistan, South Africa, New Zealand maybe. I mean, we don't need a lot of teams to be competitive. I mean, the West Indies send their second 11 now is their Test team. All their great players are playing franchise cricket. So, although I wouldn't want them to be lost to Test cricket, they might be one day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there might be a stage in the future where you might have Trinidad and Tobago as one team, Barbados, Leeward Islands,
definitely.
Islands, and Guyana. And this was an idea that someone suggested to me that, you tour West Indies like in the past, but you play one test match in Trinidad, one test match against Barbados, one test match against Guyana, and one against Windward and Leeward, and then go back like the good old days. Or test match, one day, T20, whatever it is. I think we're going to reach that stage very soon. And the reason why West Indies came about was because they needed to give it back to the colonial masters. I think they have done that and more as a team, as a cricket fraternity. I think a day is not far off when that happens very soon.
I'd agree. All right, we're going to take our first break on Cricket Unfiltered. Then we'll be back to talk about the upcoming 5 Test series between Australia and India. You're listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Menas. I'm with Chandresh Narayan, who's in studio visiting from Mumbai, and the perfect time to start to look ahead to this series coming up later this year in Australia. And Chandresh, and I'll give you my point of view. From an Australian fan, this is a huge series. We haven't beaten India in a Test series for 10 years, since 2014, in that famous series where we lost Phil Hughes on the eve of the series and then was dominated by 2 batters, Kohli and Smith. It was a wonderful display of exceptional batting. But since then, Australia hasn't been able to win. So I guess, Chandra's first question for you is, what's your impression of this Australian Test team?
I think it's a terrific test team. I think it's a dangerous test team, and I think it's being led well by Pat Cummins since he took over a couple of years ago. And I think he is a fantastic leader, and they have a very good test team. I just hope that they don't force Smith to keep opening the batting in the test match.
Okay, so you'd like to see him down the order?
I like to see him down the order because I think he's just trying to prove a point that he's flexible and he's a team man. We know he's a team man. Move him back to where he belongs. He is better off in the middle.
He's not just trying to prove a point, though, because he did say he was getting frustrated waiting to bat. And when he came into the Test side, our top order was really struggling, so he was getting out there early. But in the last couple of years, you've had Usman Khawaja, obviously David Warner, but also Marnus Labuschagne, who've had much more of a steadying influence at the top of the order, and he got frustrated waiting. So he wanted to go and open. But I see what you're saying. If you're a bowler and you're bowling to potentially the greatest Test batter of our generation, you'd much rather bowl to them with a brand new ball that's got extra bounce and moving more than maybe an older ball. So that if you're a bowler and you get at him early, while you're fresh, so you'd like to see him move to the middle order. That might happen. Andrew McDonald was on the radio here recently, the Aussie coach, and he wasn't very definitive about whether Steve Smith would open the batting.
Okay. That's good. That's good. It shows that they don't have a closed mind, and I think that the lineup will look a lot better if they have an opener at the top. I don't know who that would be. Who would partner Usman Khawaja? I think could it be Khwaja's last Test series? He's already pushing on in age.
Well, I think he might try and hang around for the Ashes the year after.
Okay.
But it is form dependent.
Okay.
I mean, you know what it's like when a player's in their late 30s, if their form starts to slip, they can find themselves out of the team very quickly. And this is where I think Australia might be vulnerable. Khawaja at the top, getting on a bit. Say Smith's opening as well. But then you've got Marnus, who's been up and down recently with his form. Then you've got Cameron Green at 4, untested. He's done well, made a great 100 in New Zealand, but going to be a big challenge against India. And then you've got Head and Mitch Marsh. So I think there is a vulnerability there for India's fast bowlers.
I think having said that, for India, it's going to be a tough series, unlike the previous 2 times.
Why?
Because the bowling attack is not getting any younger.
So who do you think it'll be? Obviously Bumrah if he's fit.
Bumrah if he's fit. Shami is just coming back from a surgery. Siraj, obviously. And then you'll have a crop of young fast bowlers that they might pick. You've got a wide variety to pick from. You've got the likes of Avesh Khan, Mukesh Kumar, Arshdeep Singh, or they surprise everyone by picking the wild Mayank Yadav, who impressed everyone by bowling quick. But it's one thing to bowl 150 plus in a T20 match, and another thing to bowl in a first class match or a Test match, where you need to bowl multiple spells and so on and so forth all day. So that's going to be interesting to see how they pick their squad. They might end up picking 5 to 6 fast bowlers for that particular series. Obviously, the spinners pick themselves. Aksar, Ravichandran Ashwin and Ravindra Jadeja and Kuldeep Yadav. So they have 4 options there for spin. So Kuldeep will definitely have to play because he brings in something extra with his leg spin. So the bowling attack, they're not getting any younger. Uh, they have already moved on from the experienced Ishant Sharma and Umesh Yadav, who played a big part in putting in that pace attack with Bumrah and with Shami. They formed a very good pace attack. Bumrah, Shami, Ishant and Umesh. And then Siraj came in. Now they've moved past Umesh and Ishant. So it's going to be interesting to see how they manage that situation. And batting as well, there were a lot of interesting options.
Getting older too. I mean, Kohli and Sharma are getting on a bit.
Yeah, this could be the last test series that you see Kohli, Sharma, Ashwin, Shami.
Where's Kohli at?
I get a sense, I'm not spoken to him at all, but I get a sense that we are in the final phase of Kohli as an international cricketer. He's already retired from T20 internationals, and he's reached that stage where I think that he wants to spend more time with his family. And I get worried when I see him talk a lot to AB de Villiers. I'll tell you why. Because AB also left the game abruptly. And I get a sense that, Kohli also might just end up giving up the game abruptly. He's already moved his family to London. They're based in
I
London.
didn't know that.
So they are based in London now. His son was born in London. You're already seeing signs of him moving away from India. And he said on record that once he retires, he'll disappear. You won't find him anywhere. That's
like Sachin.
Sachin is all over.
Really?
Yeah, he's all over. You come to India, he's all over. He's endorsing some products. He's inaugurating some event.
I'll never forget when Sachin came here for the Bushfire Appeal charity game that was played here just before COVID, and I'd forgotten the aura that came with Sachin Tendulkar, and he did a press conference at the SCG, and normally they're pretty quiet affairs, especially, it was midweek. It was heaving. I mean, there were fans, and the Indian community had heard he'd be at the SCG, and there were hundreds of people looking to get a glimpse of Sachin. But anyway, back to Kohli. I do think taking the captaincy away from him did something to him. Or I don't know if it was taken away. You'd probably know a bit better about the machinations. But I felt the best Kohli was when he was captain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote a piece actually the day he resigned from Test captaincy. Remember, he quit T20 captaincy.
But he was pushed, wasn't he?
Yeah, so basically his plan was that he said hand over the T20 captaincy to a younger guy. I'll continue as the one-day captain till the 23 ODI World Cup, and I'll continue as a Test captain. That was his plan. But the BCCI said, sorry, you can't decide who becomes the captain. We decide that. And so first he gave up the T20 captaincy, and then the ODI captaincy was snatched away from him. And then when they lost the Test series in South Africa, which they should have won, they were leading 1-0. And against a subpar South African team a couple of years ago, I think that really pushed him back. And a new coach had taken over in Rahul Dravid, and things were not really up to the mark with the board and Kohli. Kohli had a very good partnership with Ravi Shastri. The new coach, he couldn't, I don't know, so lots of things, and then he quit Test captaincy in a half. I felt that for Indian cricket, it was very important that he should have continued as the Test captain, because he brought the fire in India's Test cricket. And he was needed because he put together a plan with Ravi Shastri to have a fast bowling attack, which did well. They may not have won a Test series in England, but they did quite well over there, put up a good account of themselves.
Definitely.
Australia, they won twice, Australia. So I think that they should have continued, but there are certain people who thrive in responsibility and with pressure. Kohli is one of them, and he loves Test cricket. And that's why you need someone like him at the top, because if the captain is like driving the message about Test cricket being the important force, nothing else matters.
I mean, I do think Kohli's a better on-field Test captain than Sharma.
Yeah.
I don't think Sharma's a bad captain, But I do think he can let the game drift a bit more than Kohli does. Kohli is so hyped up and he's so into the game. There's never a dull moment when he's captain.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And also, I think that, but in the case of both Kohli and Sharma, I somehow feel that once you have the seventh wicket falling, especially overseas, that's when both of them let the game drift.
Yep.
And I've seen that on quite a few overseas tours. In fact, before every overseas test tour, I always tweet that my bet for this particular series for a lower order batter to score runs against India is this person. So, like for this particular tour, I think Pat Cummins, Mitchell Stark are the two people I think will score a lot of runs against India, because India just let things drift once the sixth wicket falls. They sort of spread the field and so on and so forth. And I get very frustrated when I'm looking at that.
Well, what about last tour? I mean, it was the opposite. When India were here and won, Australia just couldn't finish India off. They had them on the ropes in Sydney, couldn't win. They had advantage in Brisbane, Gabba. They couldn't win. I mean, those last two tours of Australia by India must be magical memories for you. I mean, that first win in 1819 was special, but it was clouded by the fact that our two best batters were unavailable. But then to come back a few years later and to win when you've been bowled out for 30 odd in the first test, I mean, it was an incredible turnaround. I mean, one of the great performances from a touring side we've ever seen. And, you know, in my time, South Africa won 3 series here in a row, which was incredible. They had that great team led by Steyn and de Villiers and a host of others. But India to win 2 series in a row here is quite phenomenal. I mean, it must be, you know, that must be a real source of pride.
Absolutely. I think that was a time when, after a long time, Test cricket sort of was a topic of discussion in India because of the way India won that Test series in 2021. And I think it's also because for a very long time, India had wanted to come here and win a Test series. They came very close in 1985-86 under Kapil Dev. In fact, Kapil Dev and a few others from that particular tour still keep telling me about the fact that in Melbourne,
The umpires.
I
knew it.
Yeah, so they keep telling me about the umpires and how Alan Border was out a few times.
There's one particular Mel, I can't remember his name. There was one umpire that wouldn't put the finger up.
So and the last wicket ended up adding some 70, 80 runs. Again in Sydney, they were following on, and again there was a problem. And they should have won the Test series. So what happened in 18-19 should have happened in 85-86. You wouldn't have had to wait for 33 years for that to, or 23 years, or however the count is. So I think
Shastri was bloody happy after that win in 18-19.
So he was part of that 85 tour. So he knows what he went through at that time. 80-81 also they came very, as in they leveled the series in 80-81. Melbourne, Kapil Dev bowled a fantastic spell. So I think that, so last time India toured, also the circumstances. Ganguly, what's his name? Kohli went on a paternity leave after the first Test match. India bowled out for 36. Shami getting injured, Umesh Yadav getting injured, Bumrah getting injured, Ashwin getting injured, Jadeja going back home. So it was virtually like, they had to just keep all the reserves kept getting into the playing 11.
It was incredible.
It was the way they saved the Test match in Sydney. Hanuma Vihari with a torn hamstring.
I don't think the captaincy from Australia was particularly good that match.
Because I think he was too focused on talking to the batters rather than coming up with some strategy. He dropped a catch, if you remember, after trying to troll Ravichandran Ashwin. So all these factors put together, that win was incredible because of the amount of loss of players that they had because of injuries and player going back. And I think I've never seen a tour where every other person was getting injured. The closest was the 94-95 Ashes by England, where they came with 17 players. And I think at the end of the tour, there had some 25 players who played in that series for England.
I remember that one. So this is the first Test series between Australia and India that will play 5 Tests since 91-92 series. And I was at the SCG for that. No, I know I don't look old enough. Thank you, Chandresh, for saying that. But I was there for that 1992 Test match where Shane Warne made his Test debut. Ravi Shastri made a magical double 100. And it was it's actually one of the great test matches. People still talk about it. Just, one of those great occasions. So I'm really looking forward to having another 5-test series. And I guess one player I'm really looking forward to seeing is Rishabh Pant. After his terrible car accident, we saw him playing in the IPL. He's looking fantastic again. He played that famous knock, well, 2 famous knocks, but the match-winning knock at the Gabba. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him this summer. Do you think they'll bring him?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before the accident, he was India's best test batter. And I think that he'll play a big part in that test series.
Good.
I think he'll be very crucial to India's chances.
So what do you think going into this series? Who do you sort of mark as favourites?
I think Australia start as slight favourites because of the fact that they are playing at home, and that side is much more settled. And India has gone through a few changes in their test squad. With the Cheteshwar Pujaras of the world and the Ajinkya Rahanes of the world going away.
So do you think the top order is vulnerable for India?
Possibly.
Because historically, that's been one of the areas where the extra bounce and pace of these pitches has exposed players that haven't had as much experience here.
Absolutely, because Yashasvi Jaiswal will be opening for India in a test match in Australia for the first time. Shubman Gill came on the last tour as a young man. He's had years of experience. He's currently vice captain of the one-day and the T20 side. He might end up being the test vice captain as well. So he'll have some pressure on him. He'll be batting at number 3 in the test series. The batting order is slightly inexperienced. You don't know who you're going to play at 5 and 6. So 4 is definitely going to be Kohli. But 5, you have an option of playing either KL Rahul or Sarfaraz Khan, who did quite well against England in the test series at home earlier this year. And then you've got Rishabh Pant. So I think that's going to be crucial because you have a few young players, Jaiswal, Gill, and possibly Sarfaraz Khan. The 3 new players who will be playing Test cricket in Australia for the first time. And then you've got Rishabh Pant who's played previously. So I think that batting order is slightly vulnerable if I had to look at it very closely. I would have liked them to give Rahane and Cheteshwar Pujara one more go. But the selectors and the team management earlier this year, in spite of the fact that they had so many injuries and Kohli not being there, they still didn't go for an experienced player like Pujara who was scoring runs in Ranji Trophy. They preferred a younger player.
Wow. I agree with you. I have Australia's slight favourites as well, and I think this team's in a really good space. My concern is not this summer as an Australian, but it's the summer after the Ashes, because I think then we do start to get into an issue where maybe Khawaja is too old, maybe Stark's too old, and you can go down the list. Maybe there's other players that have passed their best. So I have Australia definite slight favourites, but I think it's going to be a classic series. Australia like are due to win. Like I think their pride will be wounded after that last series because you can't say they were the better team, but they had their chances to win the last series here and they didn't take them. And they did okay in India last year, but I'd give them slight favourites. But it's one thing you can't do is this Indian team never gives up.
Absolutely.
That's the difference. So an Indian team, 85, if they were bowled out for 30 in the first test match,
they would have given up.
That's it, they're gone. Whereas now there's a real steel in that Indian team, a real spine that we haven't seen. And there's also another phenomenon. I've got 2 things I want to talk to you before we leave this. One is pommy bashing. We'll get to that in a minute. The next thing, though, is I have noticed a real fantastic camaraderie between the Australian Indian players. Like, it doesn't affect them when they're on the field playing. They play as competitive as ever. But if you're there for the, say, hour or 2 before the game, you just watch them all talking to each other. They all play with each other in the IPL. They're all mates. And I would go one step further. I think there's an element from the Australian team that it's not that you don't want to piss off the Indian team, but if you're mates with, say, Sharma, and well, he's a bad example, but say Sharma and he's captaining a team in the IPL, he might go at the auction, oh yeah, we really need to get that player. And all of a sudden you get big money. So I think there's a financial incentive to engender yourself towards Indians, but there's a real camaraderie that wasn't there. You mentioned 85, 86. Now the teams are very close.
Yeah, 85, 86, they were not playing with each other outside.
No.
English county cricket, possibly only Shastri was playing county cricket at that time for India. They may have been playing league cricket, but there was no real mateship as such. And so I wouldn't say that there was any close mateship then. Now they're playing IPL every year for 3 months. They're spending time with each other in the dressing room. They're batting together, bowling together. Cummins is captaining a side in the IPL.
Exactly.
Warner captained a side in the IPL few times. So that sort of builds a relation between players. You get to know players very closely. So, like for example, Rishabh Pant is so close to Ricky Ponting. You wouldn't have imagined about 7-8 years ago that Ponting even knew that Rishabh Pant existed. So now they're like family.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the kind of relation that the players have with each other, not just current players, even the former players. So they all know
There's
each
so
other.
many Aussie coaches
Yeah,
there.
so many Aussie coaches. So they all know each other very well. So I think that that sort of brought them very close, and I think it's a good thing that they're not like they're just letting the game be.
Absolutely. They're very competitive on the field. They won't take a backward step, but it's that change off the field that's really noticeable.
Yeah. For a very long time, when say in the 90s, when India didn't play Australia that often, or even in the 80s, Australia didn't tour India for about 10 years after the 86 Test series. So there's we in India didn't know much about the Australians. And whenever Australia would tour, say, New Zealand or Sharjah to play India in a one-day match, Australia would always send their second string side without their main players. Either Jeff Marsh is captaining the side or someone else is captaining the side. I remember one Australasia Cup in '94. It was, I think, Justin Langer who was keeping. There was no Ian Healy. They didn't even bother to send Tim Zorer or Phil Emery or anything of that sort to that particular tournament. So we never knew much about the Australian side. So now a lot of us know a lot about the Australian side, the options that they have. The internet's like sort of bridged all the gap.
Exactly.
IPL has really brought everybody close.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's lovely to see. All right, we're going to take our final break, then we'll be back with Can't Let It Go. You're listening to a special edition of the Cricket Unfiltered podcast with Chandresh Narayan, Indian cricket journalist who's visiting from Mumbai. It's great to have him in studio. And I've just got one Can't Let It Go for you, Chandresh, and it's been annoying me since the Ashes last year. Firstly, I want to thank India for spanking England earlier this year in that Test series. I mean, England were due an ego check and they were humiliated. And, an all-time embarrassment was Ben Duckett trying to take credit for Joswell's double hundred. I guess first thing, in Australia, the English attitude since Bazball took over is really annoying. And I'm not actually speaking just for me. It's been publicised that there's a lot of other people that feel that England are saying they're changing cricket, but they're not doing much different than other teams.
Yeah, they're not doing much different. I agree with you completely. And there's a lot of talk, as you could imagine, with England. And I think that talk is cheap. You need to show some action.
Like win something.
Yeah, and I think that they've beaten West Indies recently. But I think that their real challenge will come. They were exposed in India earlier this year.
Embarrassed.
Embarrassed, absolutely. And I think they have a lot of theories. In the past, when 98, when they came for the Ashes year, they had these theories that, Alex Tudor is a fast bowler, he'll play only at Perth. Alex Tudor is a fast bowler, he'll only play at Brisbane because there is bounce there. They have these theories. I thought that with time that theories would have improved or they would have let that to rest. This time, I think that they've gone back to having those theories. And I think even if they don't want to talk about all these things, it's their media which hypes them up by coming up with different kinds of theories about the side. And even while this Test series against West Indies was going on, all the talk was about next year's Ashes. They are not bothered about the World Test Championship final. There's no talk of making it to the World Test Championship final. There's no intent from Ben Stokes to say we want to make it to the World Test Championship final. Their only focus seems to be playing Ashes at home and Ashes away. Nothing else seems to matter.
Kind of scares me that because I am nervous because when someone like Stokes is so focused on one thing, it can be dangerous for opponents. And you speak about the English cricket writers, and hello if you're listening, they've been conned. Like they are totally in bed with the team now.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the English cricket writing is in a pretty dire state because they're just cheerleaders for the team. But I think what you said, all the theories. There's a certain arrogance to it, and I found particularly galling what happened at Lords last year with the run out of Johnny Bairstow, because I actually think that was completely throwing out the spirit of cricket, and Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes trying to distract people from the fact that they were 2-0 down. Everyone said Brendan McCullum's this great bloody bloke. Oh, he's such a great bloke. He goes on national TV and says, I'm not going to have a beer with them because they got out one of my players, which then incited the English crowds to behave like heathens for the rest of the summer. And I think England cricket are full of hypocrites. Their spirit of cricket is only they only use the spirit of cricket when it suits them. And I think Brendan McCullum, I want to get him. I hope he does a press conference next summer. I hope he's still the coach. I'm going to ask him, like, spirit of cricket is not going on TV and saying I'm not going to have a beer with them because they got one of my players out.
Absolutely, and I think the spirit of cricket talk is all bullshit.
Mm.
I think it's a waste of time, and it's something that some unwritten code that someone has come up with some time of the other. I think it makes no sense whatsoever.
Not at all.
Yeah, your player got out. Got out. Carry on with it. Why do you need to come out in public and say that you won't have a drink with the rival? Who's asking you to have a drink with anybody?
No, they didn't in the end. They didn't. They didn't have a drink, and normally the team's used to. And I think it's also stupid because England go, oh, I wouldn't do that if I was playing county. If I was playing park cricket, playing with my mates, I wouldn't run someone out like that. Yeah, of course. If you're playing on a Sunday and some 50-year-old guy wanders out of his crease, you might not run him out because it's a bit of fun. When you're playing a professional game being paid millions of dollars, you just play by the rules. And it's that simple. And so I think the way English cricket is carrying on has been very bad, very poor. And, it's frustrating for me because I think Australia had a real chance to spank them in last year's Ashes and just got our tactics a bit wrong after that second test. We got spooked. Australia, in fact, in a way, it was a genius move from Stokes and McCullum because they fired up their team. They fired up the crowd. But they're very frustrating to watch.
Yeah, and but I think next year's Ashes will be very interesting. But England always keep talking. They talk a lot. I haven't seen any action since the 2010 Ashes. I haven't seen them do anything.
It's true.
They haven't won a test match in, I think.
They haven't won a test match here since then.
Yeah, so I think the previous two tours.
5-0, 4-0, 5-0, 4-0, I think, in the 4 series.
Yeah, so, and I think before that as well in 2006,
Yes.
they lost final.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think that just that was a slight blip in their radar. I think they spend so much time thinking about the Ashes that they forget that there are other things to win and worry about as well.
I think for an Australian and English sporting fan, you're always thinking about the Ashes a little bit. It's just so much part of our DNA and goes so deep. I mean, I can't tell you how deep the hatred got between the two nations during the Ashes last year, particularly for me. But it was everywhere. I mean, everywhere I walked, people wanted to talk about the bloody Poms. So it's always there, but I think the mistake is you don't always talk about it. Like, it's very disrespectful if I'm playing West Indies tomorrow and I'm Ben Stokes and I say, I'm thinking about the Ashes. You can think that, but don't be dumb enough to say it.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And it's like in the past where the English teams would think that one day cricket is a waste of time. And they would be forced to come to Australia and play the World Series Cup, wear colored clothing and play that. And when they go back in England, they had just 3 one-dayers. You remember those days when they would just play 3 one-day internationals in a series in England when Australia were
of
tour for
course.
Ashes. So I think
They play whites.
yeah. So and it showed a bit of disrespect to a format where I think that once they started doing well in white ball cricket, everything is kosher.
Yeah.
Till then, it's like just a bit of a hit and giggle. That's what they used to say.
Yeah. They have the real fallen empire syndrome,
Yes,
England,
yes.
and it sort of permeates through their culture.
Yeah.
And personally, and I don't know what the cricket's like in India, and I'm not trying to judge people, not trying to judge people who do it here. I find the over excessive drinking in the cricket grounds in England to be quite a turn off. I know it's not everywhere and certain areas are worse than others, but for me personally, it seems like a lot of English fans, and there's Australian fans and fans all around the world, and I'm not trying to take away people's enjoyment. Just personally, I find it a little bit distasteful that so many fans in England are there just to get as drunk as they can and yell at people.
We don't get to see people drinking in India because it's not allowed in the regular stands.
Good.
So it's only allowed
would
in
love
some
it.
hospitality boxes. So that's not a problem that we encounter in India. So we are lucky that way.
Yeah. What do you think when you travel around grounds and you see everyone drunk and falling over?
I don't quite. I find it very unruly. I find it very like you come to enjoy the game. You shouldn't cross the line.
Yeah.
I think that's what people should respect the game as well.
Yeah, you can have a couple of drinks, relax, have a good time, of course, but have some sensibility about you're in public as well, and you get messy, you start knocking into people. It gets frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, good way to end with some discussion about the English cricket team, one of my pet hates. Chandresh, it has been great to have you on Cricket Unfiltered. It's been great to meet you in person, have you in studio. Where can the listeners find your work? Where can they follow your shows?
So I have a YouTube channel called Cricket Chronicles with Chandresh. So you can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Chandresh Narayanan. So you can find me there. Also, I'm on Twitter, or X. Sorry, Elon. Please, you've snatched my verification.
I still call it Twitter.
Yeah. So it's Chand2579. So you can follow me on these three places. I write a lot. I get abused a lot for my opinions. So please join the fun.
Well, it'd be great to talk to you during the Border-Gavaskar series, whether you come to Australia or whether you're still in Mumbai. Let's catch up during the series. But great to have you on the show and enjoy the rest of Australia.
Thanks a lot for having me.